Along the jagged coast of Marsa Alam, where the desert sands meet the Red Sea, a lone lighthouse stands abandoned. It rises like a skeletal finger pointing at the sky, a structure that appears on no map and is feared by every fisherman. Locals whisper that its light still ignites at sunset, not with a warm, guiding glow, but with a deep, sinister red, as if fueled by blood. They say it calls to men, luring them to a fate worse than drowning. Tonight, one man will dare to answer that call. Samir Galal stood on the shore, the coarse sand grinding beneath his feet. This was where they found his brother Ali's boat, drifting aimlessly, its ropes frayed and torn as if ripped apart by some immense, violent force. The other fishermen gathered at a distance, their faces etched with a mixture of pity and fear, refusing to meet his gaze. Only one old man, his skin as wrinkled as a dried date, dared to approach. He leaned in, his voice a raspy whisper against the sea breeze. "Your brother Ali did not drown," he said, his eyes darting toward the distant tower. "He followed the red light. The light, it calls them." Samir's hand tightened around a piece of the broken rope. Ali wasn't one for ghost stories or local legends. He was a practical man, a fisherman who knew the sea better than he knew himself. If Ali went toward that lighthouse, Samir knew with chilling certainty something had dragged him there. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a flicker of light appeared at the pinnacle of the distant tower. It pulsed with a deep crimson glow, a malevolent heartbeat in the gathering darkness. Without hesitation, Samir began walking toward it, his shadow stretching long behind him on the sand. The journey to the lighthouse was an ordeal in itself. He navigated treacherous, reef-strewn shallows and climbed over dunes that shifted like living things in the wind. By the time he reached the base of the tower, the sky was a deep, bruised purple, and the red light above pulsed with an unnerving, rhythmic intensity. The lighthouse door, a massive slab of iron, was covered in rust and warp by salt and time. It looked as if it hadn't been opened in a century. Yet, as Samir reached out to push it, it creaked open on its own, a groaning invitation from the darkness within. A cold, damp air, thick with the smell of brine and decay, washed over him. The interior was even more derelict than the outside. The floor was a carpet of wet sand and rotting seaweed. Tattered nautical charts clung to the curved walls like peeling skin. Their lines and symbols faded into indecipherable patterns. The only sound was the slow, hollow tap-tapping of seawater dripping from some unseen point in the ceiling, each drop echoing like a countdown. In the center of the room, a spiral staircase ascended into the gloom, its iron steps corroded and encrusted with barnacles that looked like bony growths. Samir placed his foot on the first step, testing its strength. It held. He began his climb into the suffocating darkness. He had only ascended a few steps when a deafening slam echoed through the tower. He spun around. The heavy iron door had swung shut, plunging the entrance into near-total blackness. A deep, resonant hum began to vibrate through the very stone of the lighthouse, a low, metallic thrumming that felt ancient and profoundly wrong. He pushed the fear down and continued upward, his hands sliding along the cold, damp wall. Halfway up the winding ascent, he heard it, the distinct sound of wet, heavy footsteps dragging on the stairs below him. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest, and looked back down into the abyss. There was nothing, just shadows. But then, on the step directly behind where he had just been, A fresh, wet footprint materialized in the dust. And then another, closer. A voice, faint and ethereal, drifted up the stairwell, wrapping around him like a cold mist. "Samir, hurry." His blood turned to ice. He knew that voice. It was Layla, his brother's wife, who had drowned in a storm 2 years ago. The voice was a perfect imitation, filled with a desperate, pleading urgency that tore at his soul. Before he could process the horror, the voice shifted, melting and reforming into the deeper tones of his brother Ali. "Samir, don't leave me down here." The plea was laced with terror. The dragging footsteps below suddenly broke into a frantic, splashing run, clambering up the stairs with impossible speed. Panic seized him. Samir abandoned all caution and scrambled up the remaining stairs, his breath coming in ragged gasps, the horrifying sounds of pursuit echoing just behind him. He burst through the opening at the top, stumbling into the lantern chamber, the red light pulsing all around him. He expected to find a modern lamp, perhaps a broken generator. Instead, what he saw defied all reason. The chamber's large glass windows were shattered, with shards pointing outward, as if from a powerful explosion from within. The last vestiges of the crimson sunset filtered through the broken panes, but they were not the source of the room's infernal glow. In the center of the chamber stood a massive ancient brazier, forged from black metal and intricately carved with Egyptian hieroglyphs. From it, a furious crimson flame roared, casting dancing, monstrous shadows on the walls. And standing beside it was a figure that had clawed its way out of a nightmare. It was tall and skeletal, its form draped in the tattered, rotted robes of an architect from the late dynasties. Its skin was the color of gray, waterlogged stone, cracked and fissured from centuries spent beneath the waves. His eyes, sunken into a gaunt face, were not eyes at all, but two molten jewels that reflected the unholy fire of the brazier. This was no ghost. This was a physical entity, an ancient evil. The architect of a pharaoh drowned along with his master's hidden tomb and cursed to wander the depths, forever seeking materials and souls to complete his submerged eternal project. The creature turned its head, a slow, grinding movement. Its voice was a horrifying chorus of rushing tides and grinding stone. "You seek the one taken by the light," it rasped, the words bubbling as if spoken through water. Your brother heard the call. He serves the deep now. Rage burned through Samir's terror. "Where is he?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "What have you done with him?" The architect did not answer directly. Instead, with a slow, deliberate movement, it turned its stony gaze toward the roaring flames in the brazier. Samir followed its line of sight, peering into the heart of the crimson fire. And there, amidst the swirling, chaotic inferno, he saw them. Faces, twisted and silent, unending agony. Souls trapped within the cursed flame, their features writhing and contorting. And among them, his eyes wide with horror, and his mouth open in a scream that made no sound, was Ali. The strength fled from Samir's body. He collapsed to his knees on the cold stone floor, the monstrous, pulsing red light of the brazier bathing him in its glow, the silent screams of his brother burning into his very soul. He was trapped, a witness to a hell he could never have imagined, at the top of the world in the lighthouse that did not exist. The architect gripped Samir's forehead, and reality shattered. His hand was a thing of the deep, icy, and heavy with the weight of drowned men. One moment, Samir stood on the cold stone floor of the lighthouse, the salt spray on his lips. The next, his mind was ripped from his body and plunged into the abyss. He wasn't just seeing the sea, he was in it, part of its crushing, silent darkness. Below him, a structure of impossible scale defied the ocean's pressure. It was a massive, sunken pyramid, its dark stone wedged between mountains of vibrant coral and the splintered skeletons of countless shipwrecks. It was a graveyard and a monument all in one, but this place wasn't dead. Red fire, like blood in veins, pulsed through its submerged hallways, casting an infernal glow against the eternal light of the deep. And the workers, they were there. Legions of the drowned dead floated in perfect, horrifying rows. Fishermen, sailors, merchants, all of them, their bodies preserved by the unnatural cold, forever frozen mid-construction. One held a block of stone, his expression one of eternal strain. Another pointed, his mouth open in a silent command that would never be heard. They were the architect's hands, the builders of this underwater tomb. Samir's consciousness was pulled deeper, through corridors that twisted like a nightmare, until he reached the pyramid's heart. In the deepest chamber he saw his brother, Ali. His spirit, translucent and shimmering, was held down by chains of solidified shadow. He was alive yet not, waiting to be fully bound, his essence woven into the very fabric of the eternal structure. He was to become another brick in this monument to the sea's forgotten dead. But as Samir watched, horrified, the great stone gate of the tomb trembled. A deep, grinding sound vibrated through the water. Something was wrong. Something enormous, trapped within the deepest part of the structure, pushed back. It was a presence of ancient, terrifying power, and it did not want to be contained. The vision broke with the force of a physical blow. Samir staggered backward, his lungs screaming for air as if he'd actually been holding his breath underwater. He gasped, collapsing against the damp lighthouse wall, his heart hammering against his ribs. The cold stone floor felt blessedly solid beneath him. The architect hadn't moved. He stood there, a silhouette against the swirling red light of the brazier, dripping cold seawater onto the stones. His eyes, ancient and devoid of warmth, studied Samir with an unnerving calm. When he spoke, his voice was the grinding of seabed rocks. "I need hands," he said, the words echoing the silent commands Samir had just witnessed. "The tomb must be finished. Your brother's place awaits." Samir's entire body was shaking, not just from the cold of the vision, but from the terrible, absolute finality of the architect's declaration. He looked at the phantom-like form of the being before him, a creature of salt and sorrow, and then thought of Ali, chained in the dark. A desperate, impossible idea formed in his mind. He swallowed, the sound loud in the tense silence. "Take me instead." A long, profound silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant crash of waves against the cliffs below. The architect's head tilted slightly, his gaze piercing Samir, as if weighing his very soul. He seemed surprised, or as close to it as a being of his nature could be. Finally he nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "You offer sacrifice," the architect rasped. "Few do." Before Samir could process what was happening, the architect moved. He closed the distance between them and pressed his own forehead to Samir's. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a violation. A wave of freezing, suffocating seawater flooded Samir's senses, not from the outside, but from within. It forced its way into his lungs, his stomach, his very bones. He choked, not on water, but on the very essence of the deep ocean. The change was immediate and horrific. His skin, once warmed by the Egyptian sun, turned a pale, ghastly blue, the color of a body submerged too long. His veins darkened, spreading like ink spilled under his flesh, mapping out a new, terrible geography. The worst part was his eyes. The familiar brown of his irises was consumed, replaced by the same pulsing red light that illuminated the sunken pyramid. He was becoming something else, something that belonged to the sea. As the transformation seized him, the architect turned and opened the brazier. The red flames, which had been burning with a steady, contained heat, erupted. They spiraled upward, twisting and churning, until they formed a vortex of pure crimson light, a gateway between the world of the living and the architect's domain. From the heart of that fiery whirlpool, something was torn free. Ali's trapped soul, ripped from its shadowy chains in the deep, shot out of the brazier. It slammed back into his physical body, which had been lying motionless on the floor. Ali collapsed in a heap, no longer a captive spirit, but a man of flesh and blood once more. He coughed violently, expelling seawater he'd never actually swallowed, his body convulsing as life painfully reasserted itself. Samir, now trembling, his body a war zone between his former self and the new keeper he was becoming, found the strength to speak. He looked at his brother, gasping on the floor, and his voice came out a strained, hollow whisper. He mouthed the words, each one in agony, "Go home. While you still can." The architect placed a heavy, cold hand on Samir's shoulder. The touch was not one of comfort, but of ownership. "You are now the keeper," he declared. With his purpose fulfilled and his replacement secured, he didn't hesitate. He turned, walked directly into the swirling red vortex of the brazier, and vanished, dissolving back into the sea below as if he were made of water himself. Ali, finally catching his breath, crawled toward his brother. He didn't understand what had happened, but he could see the monstrous change in Samir. "Samir, please," he sobbed, his voice raw. "Let's go home, together." He reached out a trembling hand. But Samir took a step back, moving into the ominous red glow of the brazier. When he spoke, his voice was no longer his own. It was a resonant, echoing tide pulling through a vast underwater cavern. "I cannot. The light must shine. The dead must build." At that exact moment, the last sliver of the sun disappeared below the horizon, plunging the world into darkness. And the lighthouse answered. It didn't just light up. It exploded with a violent, impossible red brilliance. A beam of pure, blood-colored light erupted from the lantern room, sweeping across the dark, churning sea. Ali could only watch in horror. His brother, Samir, stood at the lantern window, a motionless silhouette against the terrifying crimson glow. His eyes were hollow, his posture rigid. He was bound forever to the architect's ancient, awful duty. The lighthouse of Wadi El-Gamal no longer guided lost sailors to safety. It had a new purpose. It summoned souls to their eternal work in the deep. And so the lighthouse still burns, quietly, faithfully, night after night. Fishermen still see its red beam sweeping across the water, calling out to anyone lost, anyone lonely, anyone desperate enough to listen. They say a man now stands at the top, a figure with empty eyes and seawater dripping from his hands, tending the ancient flame that should have died centuries ago. The architect no longer walks the dunes, because Samir Galal has taken his place. And if you ever find yourself near Wadi El-Gamal at sunset, do not follow the red light. It does not guide ships home. it guides souls below. Good night. If you can sleep,